Close your eyes for a moment. Let the tension slip from your shoulders. Feel the space around you begin to soften. There's nothing you need to solve tonight. No conclusions you need to reach. All that's asked of you is to listen. Gently, quietly, as if each word were a whisper tracing the outline of a forgotten dream. You're about to step into a space where answers collapse and questions become the only truth. Let's begin with a sentence. This sentence is false. Simple, isn't it? And yet, the moment you try to make sense of it, something breaks. If the sentence is true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it's actually true. You're caught in a loop, a quiet, infinite spiral that doesn't end where it begins. This is the liar paradox, a statement that devours itself in the act of being spoken. Think about that for a moment. How many of your thoughts do the same? How many of your beliefs rest on the assumption that they're reliable simply because you've believed them for so long? Now imagine your entire identity behaving like that sentence. You say to yourself, I am me. But what is that me? Is it the voice inside your head, the shape of your body, the memories you carry? Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? If not, who was that? And if you are, what stayed the same? Already you can feel the floor shifting beneath you. This isn't confusion. This is the beginning of seeing clearly. Here's another question. Have you ever felt overwhelmed by options? You walk into a store, faced with 50 versions of the same thing. You stare, unsure, an invisible weight pressing against your mind. This is called the paradox of choice. The more options you're given, the harder it becomes to choose, not because choice is bad, but because too much of it creates a sense of loss. Every selection feels like a small death, a rejection of all the other versions of your life that could have been. Freedom, they told you, would make you happy, but too much freedom, it traps you. And now you wonder, how many choices in your life were actually your own? How many were illusions carefully shaped by forces you couldn't see? Let's go deeper. Have you ever truly moved? Really moved? Zeno's paradoxes would suggest you haven't. Imagine needing to cross a room. First you must go halfway, then halfway again, and again. Each step cuts the distance in half, but there's always more distance to go. In theory, you'd never arrive. Motion becomes an illusion, just a trick of the senses. But you do cross the room, don't you? You arrive at your destination. So where does the paradox go? It doesn't vanish. It waits, like a thread woven beneath reality, a reminder that your senses are not the final word. You live in a world that insists on clarity, but here, in this stillness, you begin to see that clarity is a myth, and paradox is the truth beneath it. You are both here and not, awake and dreaming, real and unraveling. Now feel your breath, noticing it, without changing it. Without changing it. Let it guide you as the next paradox arrives. The mind seeks resolution, but the soul, it listens to the unresolved. Here's a thought. What if you were created by something that only exists because you exist? That's the bootstrap paradox. An object, a person, or even an idea sent back in time, becoming the very cause of its own origin, like receiving a book from your future self, learning its contents and then traveling back to give that book to your past self, who becomes you. No one ever wrote the book, and yet the book exists. Where did it come from? This isn't just science fiction, it's a fracture in causality itself, a loop where origin is erased, where effect becomes cause, and time folds in on itself like breath returning to the lungs that just exhaled it. Now consider this. Your own memories. How many of them were created by you? And how many were planted by others, by culture, by the world's quiet programming? How much of your past was written by your own hand? Or have you simply inherited a story that no one ever began? You're not meant to answer, only to feel the question echo. Because every echo is a paradox too. It repeats, without ever being the original. And that's where you begin to feel it, don't you? This trembling truth beneath your certainty. a gentle unraveling of all the neat compartments you thought reality belonged to. Paradox doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to reveal you, because you too are a contradiction. You want safety, and you crave the unknown. You long for truth, and you fear what it might say. You yearn to be free, and yet you carry the weight of identities you no longer recognize. You are the sentence that says, "This sentence is false." And tonight, as you drift deeper into this web of impossibilities, you begin to feel the liberation of letting go. Let go of answers. Let go of structure. Let go of needing it all to make sense. Because the truth is, the deepest things about you were never meant to. You are the dream that wakes itself, the thought that thinks itself, the presence that watches the story, without ever being caught inside it. Let that settle in your body like a slow wave. Let it carry you to the edge of what the mind can hold. Because beyond that edge, we begin to explore time itself. But for now, let your breath anchor you in this feeling, the beautiful strangeness of being the paradox that shouldn't exist. And yet, here you are, still listening, still dissolving, still. You are not where you think you are, not just in space, but in time. Right now, as these words reach you, your mind thinks it's anchored in the present, but what is now, really? By the time your brain processes these sounds, a fraction of a second has already passed. You're living in echoes, perceiving ripples of a moment that's already gone, like watching lightning flash and hearing the thunder seconds later. Your awareness is always slightly behind reality, and yet you never notice, because your mind fills in the blanks. It edits reality for comfort. But reality doesn't need to be comfortable. In fact, it's rarely ever been. Think of a single point in space, a location. You believe you're in a room, on a bed, perhaps even floating somewhere between sleep and thought. But your location isn't just physical. You are also inside a mental map. A map made of memories, expectations, and assumptions. But what if the map is wrong? Think of this. You can be lying perfectly still, and your mind can transport you to a memory so vivid it overrides the present. You can be in a memory of pain or joy or regret. And in that moment, your body's reactions, your breath, your heartbeat, your emotions, don't care where you are physically, they respond as if the memory is real. So, where are you then? Here or there? The paradox is simple. Even when you're still, you're not still. Even when you're grounded, you're not, because the mind never stops moving, and yet, right now, it slows, just slightly. That's the gift of paradox. It freezes the machinery of thought. It doesn't give you an answer, it gives you space. You're not here to solve anything, you're here to feel the presence of the unsolved. There's a kind of silence hiding inside that space, a deeper quiet. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of struggle. And maybe you've noticed it. The less you try to understand, the more something opens, a window inside you. Or maybe it's a mirror. You thought paradox was confusing, but it's not confusion you're experiencing. It's freedom from needing to make sense of everything. It's the rare moment where the mind steps aside and something else begins to breathe. Let's go back to Zeno, the man who told you that movement is impossible, that you can never reach your destination because you must always cross an infinite number of halfway points. It sounds absurd, but imagine trying to walk a straight line and needing to first walk halfway and before that, halfway to halfway, on and on, dividing space into fragments so small they no longer exist. Suddenly, distance becomes infinite, and yet you arrive. You've always arrived, so the paradox remains. The mind sees it, but the body ignores it. And that's where things begin to unravel, because if your body and your logic disagree, which one is real? Maybe neither. Maybe reality itself is the paradox. You live in time, yet you can't hold it. You feel emotions that don't belong to the moment you're in. You carry names, but none of them fully describe you. You speak, and the moment a word leaves your lips, it no longer belongs to you. Nothing about you is solid, nothing is static. You are not an object in time, you are a process, a current, a wave rising and falling, never fixed, never final. And yet, you search for anchors. You try to define yourself by past decisions, by labels, by roles. But labels are masks, roles are costumes. And deep down, you know this. You know you've changed. You've let go of things you once held sacred. You've said, "I would never," and then you did. You've believed something with your whole being, and later laughed at the memory of it. You've outgrown versions of yourself like old skin. So who are you now, and who is it that keeps changing? Is there a core, is there a center, or is identity just another paradox? You want to be known, seen, understood, but how can you be fully known if you're still becoming? You're not a finished sentence, you are the sentence that keeps rewriting itself. And in this moment, this soft, slow moment, that realization doesn't have to be frightening, it can be freeing, because if you're not fixed, then you're not trapped. If you're not defined, then you're not confined. You are the space between thoughts, the breath before a decision, the quiet before the next chapter begins. And in that space, there is peace, a strange peace, because paradox doesn't ask you to fix it. It asks you to live inside it, to be the both and, the neither nor, to be awake while falling asleep, to be a body lying still while your mind travels to the edge of everything. Now let the words fall back like leaves drifting through your consciousness. Slow down, slower still. This moment isn't going anywhere. It never was. There is no rush to understand. There is only the sound of thought letting go, the edges of your awareness softening like fog, and the gentle awareness that you are not broken for not having answers. You are beautiful, for holding questions that can never be resolved. The truth doesn't live at the end of thought. It lives here, in the space thought leaves behind. Let yourself drift into that strange space just beneath comprehension. You're not trying to understand anymore. You're remembering how it feels to simply be. Not as a name, not as a role, but as presence, soft, expansive, untied to outcome. Time has already slowed for you. Maybe you didn't notice it at first. But now the seconds stretch. The silence between words grows thicker. Thought becomes less urgent. You're stepping out of the river of linearity and into something wider, something still. Most of your life you've been taught to chase conclusions, to wrap everything in a bow, resolve the story, explain the paradox. But now, you're beginning to feel the wisdom of what cannot be solved, the elegance of the unresolved. It's not a glitch, it's a doorway. And tonight, you're walking through it. Every paradox you've heard so far has asked you the same question in different clothing. What happens when logic undoes itself? This sentence is false. If that statement is true, then it's false. But if it's false, then it must be true. And so it loops, not in failure, but in eternity. Now expand that same pattern into something larger, not a sentence, but a life. What happens when the story you tell yourself about who you are starts to contradict itself? When the brave part of you is also the frightened part? When the person you've become is built on forgetting who you used to be? When the things you've survived quietly shape the very beliefs you now question? You are the paradox. The soul that wants peace, and yet keeps reaching for more. The heart that longs for freedom but holds on tightly to memory. The mind that wants truth but is terrified of losing its illusions. Even now, you're floating between these tensions, and it's okay. You're not meant to escape them. You're meant to be held by them, because inside that tension, inside that contradiction, is where you come alive. You're not here to resolve the paradox. You're here to become one with it, to let it breathe through you. Let's move even slower now. Let the words stretch longer. Let the spaces between them widen like open fields. There's no hurry. You've left the clock behind. Now you're moving in dream time. The place where night doesn't end, where nothing is urgent, and yet everything feels sacred. Do you feel it? The unraveling? The release? Your thoughts begin to dissolve like ink in water. You don't need to grab them. Let them blur. Let them mix. You're not losing clarity. You're gaining depth. And in that depth, a strange truth begins to emerge. Certainty has always been the mask of fear. The need to be sure, to be right, to define, to fix, to label. These are comforts, not truths. They keep the unknown at bay. But the unknown was never the enemy, it was the invitation. Because paradox is the breath of the unknown. Every time you sit with something you can't explain, you open a doorway into a deeper self. The part of you that isn't here to dominate reality, but to dance with it. You weren't born to conquer mystery, you were born to live inside it. Feel the silence again, let it pour into you like cool water. Notice how much space exists between now and now. That's not emptiness, that's the soul's cathedral, and in that space paradox becomes music. Have you ever noticed how the most beautiful notes aren't just the sounds? They're the pauses, the rests, the emptiness between vibrations. Without the silence, the music has no soul, and without the unanswered, truth has no meaning. So tonight, let yourself rest in the music of contradiction, the symphony of not knowing. Let every unsolved paradox cradle you like a lullaby whispered by the cosmos. You are the question that keeps unfolding, the dream that never ends. You are the stillness behind motion, the watcher of thought, the echo of something unnameable. And this moment, this slow, wide, quiet moment is yours. No destination, no answers, just presence and peace. There's a moment right before sleep when your mind begins to drift but hasn't yet let go. When thoughts lose their edges and time forgets how to move in straight lines, that's where you are now. In the between, in the gap where paradox lives. You're beginning to remember something that was never taught to you, yet somehow you've always known. That truth isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's soft, wordless, hidden in the questions that never needed to be answered. Like a feeling you can't explain but trust anyway. That trust is the beginning of freedom. Not the kind of freedom the world promises you. Not the freedom to choose 1,000 versions of the same thing, or to chase certainty dressed in new costumes. That kind of freedom is an illusion. The paradox of choice reveals it. You felt it before. That strange paralysis when offered too many options. So many paths that you forget what you truly wanted in the first place. Too many open doors don't set you free. They scatter your attention. Every yes becomes 100 quiet no's. Every decision leaves behind the ghost of all the others you didn't make. And somehow, even when you choose, you don't feel whole, because your energy has been fractured. That's the illusion. More choices are not always more freedom. Sometimes they're more distraction. And deep down you know that the thing you're looking for can't be chosen, because it was never missing. It doesn't live in the external. It lives in the center of your being, and paradox is how it whispers to you. You've always existed between opposing forces, the desire to belong and the longing to be alone, the hunger for meaning and the pull toward silence, the need to understand and the joy of surrender. You're not wrong for feeling both. You're human, and more than that, you're something timeless wearing a human face. That timelessness speaks through paradox, not to confuse you but to wake you. It's like standing in a house made of mirrors. Every direction reflects a version of you, but none of them are real. You reach toward one and it reaches back, but the glass is cold, the reflection is hollow, and in that moment you remember, you are not the image. You are the one who sees. Even your thoughts, which feel so personal, so intimate, are not you. They are movements inside you, But you are not the movement. You are the space the movement happens in. And that space? It can't be named. It doesn't belong to time. It doesn't live in the past you regret or the future you fantasize about. It only lives now, but not the now your clock measures, a deeper now, the now beneath time. And that's where the paradox gets deeper still, because the more you try to hold on to this now, the more it slips through your fingers. You can't grasp it. You can only be it. Like silence, the moment you try to describe it, you've already left it. That's why paradox matters. It doesn't lead you toward answers, it leads you into presence. And presence is where truth lives. Not the kind of truth you can argue about, not the kind you can defend, but the kind you can rest inside, right here, right now, with no need to explain. Let your body relax even further. Let your awareness float, untethered. There is nothing chasing you, no clock ticking down. You're not late for anything. You're exactly where you're meant to be, on the edge of understanding and unknowing. And somehow that edge feels like home, because you've spent a lifetime trying to resolve things that were never broken. You've tried to fit yourself into ideas, into labels, into expectations that were too small for you. But paradox never asks you to shrink. It invites you to expand, to hold two truths that contradict, and yet are both real. Like you are enough, and you are still becoming. Like you are the dreamer, and you are the dream. Like you are completely alone, and you are never alone. These are not errors, they are reminders that the soul doesn't speak in straight lines. It speaks in circles, spirals, echoes. And here, in this spiral of thought and stillness, something soft opens. Not a door, not a revelation, just a small, clear knowing that not everything has to be understood. Some things are just meant to be felt. The mind wants to arrive. It's always looking for an end point, a conclusion, a place to land. But you're beginning to feel it now, that strange, quiet realization that maybe there is no final landing. Maybe this is not a path with a finish line. Maybe it's a spiral with no center, a riddle with no punchline. And maybe that's not a flaw in the design. Maybe that's the design itself. Imagine a river trying to hold still. Imagine the wind trying to stay in one place. That's what it's like when you try to freeze yourself into a fixed identity or grasp truth with rigid fingers. It's like trying to catch a reflection in water. The moment you reach out, it vanishes. But the beauty was never meant to be held, only witnessed, only breathed. And you are breathing it now. Let's go deeper into stillness. Let the words stretch like mist across your thoughts. Let them slow you down, not to stop you, but to remind you of something you forgot. That peace doesn't come from having answers. It comes from no longer needing them. You don't need to figure yourself out tonight. You don't need to explain where you're going or why you are the way you are. You don't need to measure your worth by your clarity. In fact, some of the most profound awakenings begin in the dark, when everything you thought you knew dissolves, and all that's left is stillness. This is where truth begins to take a new shape, not as something spoken, but as something felt, a vibration, a frequency, a knowing that doesn't need words. You've been taught to fear the unknown, to seek solid ground, but there's a deeper part of you, a quieter, older part, that has always loved the mystery, that leans into the fog, not away from it, that swims in the questions like stars floating in an endless sea. That part of you is here now, and it's starting to remember. Remember that everything that's ever truly changed you wasn't explained, it was experienced. It was something you felt, a strange peace in the middle of chaos, a softness in the middle of loss, a stillness that came when you thought you'd completely unraveled. Those were paradoxes too, because how can peace exist inside pain? How can clarity arrive in the middle of confusion? How can you feel whole while everything falls apart? And yet, you felt it. You've lived it. That's how you know. This isn't just philosophy. It's memory. It's truth written into your bones. It's the part of you that knows how to sit by the fire of the unsolvable and feel warm. There's a beauty in not knowing, in letting your shoulders drop, in letting the breath be enough, in feeling yourself as a question instead of an answer. A soft, radiant question that doesn't need a reply. Only presence. Let's rest here for a moment. Nothing more to explore, just this silence, this breath. This awareness of being awareness. You can almost feel it now, the walls of your mind stretching wider, the structure of thought bending softly at the edges. You're not losing yourself, you're remembering your original shape, the shape before definitions, the shape before stories, the shape of pure perception, of presence without expectation. That's what paradox gives you, not an explanation, but an opening, a space to breathe beneath the pressure of needing to understand. And in that space, something sacred unfolds, not loudly, not in lightning or revelation, but in a soft, slow exhale that says, you're allowed to not know. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to float in the sea of contradiction and feel it holding you, not drowning you. This is what it means to dissolve certainty, not to become lost, but to become free. Notice what you're beginning to feel in your body, not just the slowing of thought, but the loosening of something deeper, something woven into the background of how you've always approached life. That quiet hum of needing to be sure, needing to be right, needing to know where it all leads. And now, it's fading, like mist in morning light. You're not gripping for answers anymore. You're watching them float by. You're letting the questions breathe on their own without suffocating them in conclusions. And in that surrender, something ancient inside you is awakening. You're remembering how it feels to live in mystery, without fear, to be surrounded by the unknown and still feel safe, to let life whisper riddles to you and answer not with logic but with presence. Because not everything that's real needs to make sense. You know this, even if no one ever told you. The most beautiful things in your life have always been paradoxical. How love can break you open and heal you in the same breath. How loss can take something away and still leave you with more. How silence can speak louder than any voice ever could. These aren't exceptions. They're the blueprint. The soul was never meant to live in a straight line. It was designed to stretch across dimensions of meaning, to feel 10 things at once, to exist in 1,000 emotional layers that never quite align, but somehow all belong. You are not a puzzle waiting to be solved. You are a mystery meant to be experienced. Let that settle over you like a soft blanket. Let it wrap around the mind's desire to resolve and gently hush it. You're safe here. Here in the unspoken. Here in the contradiction. Here in the space where language ends and awareness begins. This isn't emptiness. It's fullness, without form. And if that sounds impossible, good. That's the point. You've entered the sacred terrain where things don't fit into boxes, because boxes are too small for the infinite, where identity, time, space, even logic all become playgrounds, not prisons. And the soul? The soul doesn't care about being reasonable. It cares about being free. And freedom isn't tidy. It's messy. It's wild. It dances on the edge of clarity. It whispers truths that contradict each other and asks you to hold both in your heart without breaking. That's what you're doing now. You're holding the paradox. That nothing is certain and yet you are safe. That you are completely alone and also connected to everything. That you are one single breath in a vast universe. And somehow you contain that universe inside you. Don't try to resolve it, just feel it. Because the moment you try to define it, you shrink it. And this truth, this presence, it wants to remain vast. This is the paradox of awareness. The more you soften into it, the more real it becomes. But the moment you try to capture it, it slips away. So instead of grasping, listen, Instead of thinking, feel. Instead of seeking, remember. Remember what it felt like as a child to look up at the sky and feel something wordless. That tug, that awe, that sense that something enormous and invisible was breathing right alongside you. That was paradox too. That was the moment you touched something eternal without needing to understand it. That was you, aligned with the mystery. You haven't lost it, you've just learned how to talk over it. But now, the talking is fading, now the silence is speaking again, now the paradox is no longer a problem to solve but a path to follow. And the path is made of not knowing. Not as confusion, but as reverence, as trust, as sacred humility in the face of something too vast for any system to hold. You are not small because you don't have answers. You are vast because you carry the questions. And you are powerful not because you control the mystery, but because you can feel it, alive inside you, even now. There's a shift happening in you now, not a loud one, not something you can point to and name, but it's there, quiet, gentle, like the turning of a tide in the middle of the night. You're beginning to see what was always hidden beneath your need for clarity. A softness, a surrender, a deep inner knowing that maybe the most important truths are not the ones you chase, but the ones that wait patiently for you to slow down. You've slowed down, and in that stillness, paradox is no longer a riddle. It's a companion. It doesn't ask you to think harder, it asks you to feel deeper, to live in the space where two truths that contradict can both be real. Like, I am lost, and I am exactly where I'm meant to be, or I don't know who I am, and I've never been more myself. You can feel it now, can't you? This strange, sacred state where your identity begins to blur, and in that blurring you don't disappear, you expand, you become more. Not by defining yourself tighter, but by allowing yourself to be bigger than any definition. You are not a role, not a label, not a category. You are a living paradox. You are made of light and shadow, certainty and doubt, endings and beginnings woven into the same breath. And that breath, this breath, is a miracle. Not because it answers anything, but because it continues. Despite everything, despite the contradictions, despite the chaos, the breath keeps coming. You keep existing. And somehow, that's enough. So much of your life has been built on the illusion that you must solve everything before you can rest. But what if the opposite is true? What if rest is what allows the truth to find you? Not the loud, sharp truths that slice the world into pieces, but the soft ones, the truths that whisper, the truths that emerge when you stop digging and start listening, the truths that live in paradox, like how the more you let go, the more whole you feel, or how silence can say everything words never could, or how the questions you feared might break you are the very ones holding you together. You don't need to run from them anymore. You can let them echo. You can let them take up space. You can let them live in you, because you are a temple now, a temple that welcomes paradox, that honors uncertainty as holy, that knows truth doesn't arrive fully dressed. It reveals itself layer by layer, in the slow unraveling of everything you thought you knew. That unraveling, it's not a breakdown, it's a becoming. And you are becoming now, not something new, but something deeper, something that was always here, waiting beneath the surface of certainty. The part of you that can hold tension without trying to fix it. The part of you that can be present without needing proof. The part of you that knows, I am not here to conquer the mystery. I am here to be in communion with it. That communion is happening now. Feel it in your breath. Feel it in the quiet between your thoughts. Feel it in the gentle awareness that you are not broken, you are unfolding. And the paradox? It's not a barrier, it's an opening. A sacred invitation to feel more, to trust more, to exist without needing the world to fit inside a story. You are the space where stories are born. You are the stillness beneath the questions. You are not the one who needs answers. You are the one who can hold the beauty of not knowing and still feel whole. Let that be your truth tonight. Let that be your rest. Not because the paradox was solved, but because it never needed to be. Time doesn't flow the way you were told it does. It doesn't move in straight lines, ticking neatly from one second to the next like beads on a string. That's just a story, a useful illusion, something designed to keep your feet on the ground, your schedule on track, and your understanding of reality clean and manageable. But time, real time, is much stranger than that. You can feel it already, can't you? The way memories come not in order but in waves. The way 5 minutes can stretch into eternity, while whole years vanish in a breath. The way a single scent, a single phrase can drag you decades backward in the span of a heartbeat. You are not a prisoner of time. You are a traveler within it. But what if time itself was never linear to begin with? What if every moment you've lived, and every moment you haven't, was folded together like pages in a book, not written one after another but existing all at once? That's where the bootstrap paradox begins, a thought experiment, but also something more. Imagine this. Someone invents a time machine. They go back in time and give Beethoven his own sheet music. He copies it, he performs it, the world hears the music. Centuries later, inspired by those same compositions, someone uses them as the key to invent the time machine, and once it's built, they bring the music back to Beethoven. No origin, no beginning. The music exists, but it was never created. So where did it come from? The answer, if there is one, unravels everything you thought you knew about cause and effect. Because you've always been told that cause leads to effect, that one thing follows another, that first comes the seed, then the tree, then the fruit. But what if the fruit created the seed? What if the end caused the beginning? This isn't just about science fiction, it's about you. Because your own existence may carry loops you've never noticed. Thoughts you think are yours, but were planted in you long ago. Patterns of behavior that keep repeating, not because you choose them, but because some earlier version of you set them in motion without knowing. You're not broken for repeating them, you're just caught in a loop. And now you're waking up inside it. That's what makes the bootstrap paradox so haunting. It's not just about time machines. It's about how ideas, beliefs, even parts of yourself might exist without origin. They were given to you, you lived them, and now they loop back around to define you again. But the moment you see the loop, something changes. You're no longer trapped inside it, you're watching it. And that's where real freedom begins. Let's go deeper, because once you start questioning time, you have to ask the next question. What happens if you go back and erase the thing that made you? That's the grandfather paradox. You travel through time and stop your own grandfather from meeting your grandmother, or you stop the moment that led to your birth, or you prevent the accident that shaped your life. If you succeed, you're never born. But if you're never born, who went back to stop it? You see the trap, the paradox, the impossibility, and yet, doesn't your mind do this all the time? Think about how often you revisit the past. How often you ask, what if that hadn't happened? Or what if I could change it? Your imagination travels backward, trying to erase or rewrite moments that hurt you. But the truth is, even the desire to change the past is a paradox, because the part of you that wants to change it was shaped by it. If you removed the event, you'd remove the version of you that wants to go back. So who's really doing the traveling? That's the loop, the self-erasure, the emotional time travel that traps you in cycles of regret, nostalgia, or longing for a different story. But here's the secret. The past isn't fixed, not in the way you think, not because you can go back and undo it, but because memory itself is alive. Memory isn't a filing cabinet, it's a mirror. And that mirror changes every time you look into it. You don't remember things as they happen. You remember them through the lens of who you are now. And as you change, so does the past. Not in facts, but in meaning. You're not editing the events. You're rewriting your relationship to them. And that is its own kind of time travel. The kind that heals. the kind that doesn't erase the wound but softens its hold. Because the paradox of memory is this: it feels like something you visit, but really it's something you create again and again, moment by moment. Your memories are being sculpted by the present, just as the present is being shaped by your memories. It's not past, then present, then future. It's all now, one endless loop, where you are both the cause and the effect, both the traveler and the path, both the wound and the healing. And that paradox doesn't have to scare you. It can free you, because if time is not what you think it is, then maybe you're not who you thought you were either. Maybe you're something more, something fluid, something timeless, wearing the illusion of time. There's something humbling about realizing your memories aren't as fixed as you once believed, that the story you tell yourself about who you are is just that, a story. A narrative stitched together by emotions, fragments, symbols, edited over time to protect you, to shape you, to help you make sense of what can't be explained. But sense-making is not the same as truth. You may remember a moment of heartbreak and see only pain, but now, with distance, you might also notice strength or clarity, or how that heartbreak quietly opened a door that would have never existed otherwise. So, what's the real memory? Was it pain, or was it transformation? The paradox is, it was both. And in seeing that, you start to understand what time really is. Not a chain of events, not a sequence you travel through, but a mirror. A fluid reflection that shifts shape depending on who's looking and when. Each time you remember something, you're not reaching into a vault. You're recreating the event from the present moment, layering it with who you've become. You are both the artist and the canvas, and in that, memory becomes an act of creation. So if the past is always being rewritten, then are you ever truly bound by it? That's a question most people are afraid to ask, because we like to believe that our past gives us stability, that what happened has already been written, that it's solid, safe, defined. But when you look closer, you begin to feel the contradiction. Because if the past can shape you, and you can reshape your relationship to the past, then where does influence truly begin? This is where the idea of causal loops starts to feel less like a thought experiment and more like a spiritual experience. You are the result of causes that may never have had a clear beginning, and you, in turn, are becoming the cause of futures that will rewrite your perception of those pasts. Time doesn't move forward, it ripples. You are not a passenger on the river of time, you are the river, flowing in all directions, creating currents backward and forward, spiraling inward with every breath, folding reality in on itself with every shift in your awareness. And this is why paradox is sacred. Because when logic ends, something else begins, a new kind of vision. The kind that lets you look at your younger self, not with judgment but with awe, because they weren't just making mistakes. They were sending messages forward in time, to you. Every decision they made, every emotion they carried, every time they cried out in confusion, they were all shaping the path you walk now, not perfectly, not clearly, but meaningfully. So the question becomes, what message will you send back? What will you whisper to the past? Not to change it, but to soften it. What will you choose to feel about those moments, now that you know memory is not a verdict, but a vessel? You're allowed to revisit those moments, not to fix them, but to be with them differently. To let compassion enter the scene, to let silence replace shame, to let presence rewrite the tone of what once felt unbearable. This is emotional time travel, and in many ways it's more powerful than any machine ever could be, because it changes not the world outside you, but the world within. And when that world shifts, your relationship to reality changes with it. This is the paradox of transformation. You cannot change the past, but you can change the past, not in fact, but in feeling, not in outcome, but in meaning. And meaning is what makes a memory sacred, or Sharp. You get to decide which. You always have, but now you remember. Now you feel the power in your hands, not as a weapon but as a balm, because you are not the victim of time, you are its co-creator. And every time you choose awareness over assumption, you are rewriting the very nature of cause and effect. You are dissolving the illusion of straight lines. You are returning to the spiral. You are becoming fluent in the language of paradox. And paradox speaks only one truth. You are always both, the seed and the bloom, the ache and the healing, the echo and the original sound. Think of a time in your life that felt like a turning point, a decision, a loss, a meeting, a goodbye, something so significant, so heavy, that it felt like a fracture in the timeline of your life. There was everything before it and everything after. Now feel how that moment lives inside you, not as just a memory, but as a feeling, a shape in your nervous system, a weight in your chest, a glow in your heart. It didn't just happen and leave. It echoed. It carved space in you. It rearranged who you thought you were. And even now, years later, the ripple hasn't fully stopped. But here's the question. Has the ripple moved only forward, or has it also moved backward? Because you see, once something changes you, it changes how you see everything that came before it. That one turning point, painful or beautiful, recolors the memories that led up to it. Suddenly things that seemed random begin to feel like preparation, or warning, or destiny. You start to remember glances, conversations, quiet signals you didn't notice before. And you wonder, was it always leading here? Was this already written? That's the paradox, because the meaning you now assign to the past wasn't there until this moment. You brought it there. You rewrote the story, not by changing what happened, but by becoming someone new who sees it differently. That's what makes time emotional, not mechanical, not objective, it's alive. And so are your memories. They are not fixed. They are responsive. They don't just sit in your mind like pages in a book. They change color depending on the light you hold them under. So now, holding this light, go back again to one of those memories you carry like a stone in your pocket, not to solve it, not to judge it, just to see it with the eyes you have now. See how your presence alters it, how your breath softens it, how the story starts to feel different. Not erased, just deeper. Like you've been reading a familiar book and suddenly you realize there was a whole chapter you missed. A subtle truth you weren't ready to see until now. That's how time works when you're awake, not as a ruler, but as a relationship. You are in constant relationship with your past. It's not locked away. It's here, living through you, shaped by you, reflecting you. And the moment you recognize that, you step into a kind of power most people never know they have. The power to live not as a product of your timeline, but as its architect. You can't change what happened, but you can change what it means. And meaning changes everything. Because the paradox of time is that your past is never done unfolding. It's not sealed off, it's breathing. And you are its breath. Let that sink in. Let it change how you see yourself. Because if your past is still alive, then so is your future. And the version of you that you're becoming is already whispering back to you across the current of now. They're not waiting for you to become perfect. They're simply asking you to listen, to let go of the need for time to make sense, to release the belief that your story is a straight line, to remember, this moment is not the middle, it's not the end, it's not even the beginning, it's all of it, all at once, the full spiral, held gently in your awareness, unfolding without demand. Rest here. You've traveled far already. And the deeper paradox is this: you haven't moved at all. Let yourself feel what that means, that you can go your entire life thinking you're moving forward when really time has been moving through you, not like a road beneath your feet, but like a wind through the trees, and you are the tree. bending, swaying, changing shape not by force but by presence. That's why the idea of erasing your own existence, the grandfather paradox, feels so unsettling, because somewhere deep inside you already know. The past and the future aren't distant lands. They're extensions of your consciousness. If you remove one thread, you don't just alter a timeline, you unweave your sense of self. You've likely done this emotionally already. Not with a time machine, but with shame, with blame, with that quiet, painful thought, if only I had never. That's a form of self-erasure, a soft attempt at rewriting yourself out of your own story. You look at parts of your life, the versions of you you don't like, the choices you wish you could undo, and you think, that wasn't me. But it was. It was a younger you, a less aware you, a still becoming you, and when you try to cut them out of the story, the paradox takes hold. Because without that version of you, this one wouldn't exist. Every mistake, every detour, every heartbreak, every forgotten dream, they weren't detours at all, they were foundations. You are standing on them right now. So the question isn't how do I erase the past? It's can I love the part of me that didn't know better? Can you hold that earlier version of yourself the way a parent holds a child, not for what they did, but for what they were trying to become? Because every self is still alive inside you. The child, the teenager, the one who fell in love too fast, the one who lost someone and didn't know how to breathe after, the one who said something they regret, the one who stayed silent when they should have spoken. None of them need to be erased. They need to be seen. That is the paradox of healing. You don't move forward by forgetting who you were. You move forward by bringing them with you, holding them in your arms and saying, you don't have to protect me anymore. I've got it now. Time travel is real. You're doing it right now. You're reaching into the past, not with machines, but with compassion. And that compassion changes everything. It rewrites the tone. It restores the connection. It turns scars into scripture. Because the real you, the you beneath all the stories and masks, has never been broken by time. It's only been softened by it. Let that softness wrap around you now. Let it touch the places you thought you had to fix. Let it whisper to the parts of you that still carry the tension of old timelines. You are safe. You are seen. You are no longer trapped inside that moment, because that moment, it's not the same anymore. Not now. Not with you here. Not with you watching it through the eyes of presence instead of pain. This is how time heals. Not by taking you away from the past, but by bringing you fully into it. Awake, aware, open. You aren't undoing your story, you're reclaiming it. The paradox is, you can't change what happened, but you can change what it gave you, and in doing that, you change everything. You're beginning to feel it now, the way memory isn't frozen in the past, but constantly flowing through you in the present. It isn't just something you recall, it's something you relive, and each time you do, your awareness adds a new layer of meaning. That's why some memories that once felt like weights begin to feel like wings. You are not bound to remember things the same way forever. You get to evolve your relationship with them. And this is where emotional time travel becomes truly powerful, not just for healing, but for awakening. Because if your past is pliable, if it can shift shape in your consciousness, then so can the self that emerged from it. You begin to see yourself less as a product of circumstances and more as a sculptor of meaning. You can feel how the timeline is no longer a straight track you're walking blindly. It's a spiral of unfolding perception, where the present reframes the past and the past echoes into your future, and you are right here, in the eye of it all. This is the paradox of self-erasure, the desire to undo the parts of your story you once wished had never happened, and the simultaneous realization that they made you, even the painful parts, even the choices you wouldn't repeat. You carry them, not as stains, but as seeds. Seeds that, given presence and compassion, grow into insight, into strength, into grace. This is not forgetting. It's remembering differently. And now you start to notice something stranger still. Time doesn't just mirror emotion, it mirrors attention. The more you revisit a memory, the more it takes shape around the energy you bring to it. If you return with fear, it hardens. If you return with love, it softens. It listens to you. It bends to your state of being. So when you revisit your past, what are you bringing with you? Blame? Guilt? Bitterness? Or curiosity? Tenderness? Forgiveness? You may not realize it, but every time you shift the way you hold a memory, you shift the future that memory creates. Because unhealed pain shapes the choices you make tomorrow, but healed pain becomes wisdom, a compass, a voice that says, I've been through the fire, and I remember how to carry light. And this too is a paradox, that the most painful experiences often become the most profound teachers, not in spite of their difficulty, but because of it. So much of your timeline has been misunderstood as fate or randomness. But what if nothing was random? Not because everything happens for a reason, but because everything contains the potential for reason. The meaning isn't always built in. It's something you awaken. You become the interpreter, the decoder, the storyteller. You get to decide what the moment becomes. Not because you're rewriting facts, but because you're reclaiming your place in the story. And the paradox is, when you change your relationship to the past, you begin to change the future that flows from it. The energy shifts, the cycle breaks, the loop opens, you're no longer the echo, you're the voice. Time doesn't end or begin with you, but it does pass through you, and how you meet it, how you breathe with it, reflect with it, feel with it, determines whether you remain inside the loop or whether you transcend it. Right now you're already stepping beyond it. You're not just remembering, you're remembering, putting yourself back together, not in the way you were, but in the way you've chosen to become. And that becoming, it starts now. It always starts now. Let's pause here. Not to stop, but to feel the weight of this moment. The moment when everything you've explored begins to converge, where loops collapse into stillness, where time, memory, identity, all the illusions of sequence and logic fall away, and all that's left is you. Not the version of you that lives in the past, not the one waiting in the future, but the one that is always here, the one outside the loop, the one watching, feeling, breathing. This moment isn't a point on a line, it's a nexus, a meeting place for all the versions of you that have ever been and all the versions still waiting to be born. And they're here now, gathered in your awareness. Not to be judged, not to be fixed, but to be held. The self who didn't know any better. The self who tried and failed. The self who forgave. The self who didn't. The self who left. The self who stayed. All of them, present. Because all of them are you, and none of them need to be erased to make this one valid. This is the paradox of identity. You are both the wave and the ocean, both the temporary form and the timeless field it rises from. Time can't contain that. It can't measure what has no edge. And you have no edge. You are bigger than the story, bigger than the sequence, bigger than the loop. But not because you broke it, because you remembered that you were never truly inside it. You were the awareness of it, the canvas beneath the clock, the witness behind the timeline. The moment you stop chasing time, time begins to fold into you. It becomes a language, one you don't speak with words, but with feeling, with intention, with presence. And now that you can feel time this way, soft, alive, circular, you start to recognize that even your future isn't waiting out there somewhere. It's growing here, in this field, in this breath. It's not a destination, it's a resonance. And every time you choose awareness over autopilot, you tune to it, you become it. So maybe you're not becoming the future, Maybe the future is becoming you, and maybe the deepest paradox of all is this. You were never supposed to escape time. You were meant to bless it, to walk through it with eyes wide open, to carry your story not as a chain, but as a song, to let every loop become a lesson, to let every paradox become a prayer, not a prayer for answers, but a prayer for presence, a way of saying, even if I never understand, I will still feel, I will still love, I will still be. And that is more than enough. So rest now. You've traveled across timelines of thought and memory, paradox and presence, and in doing so you've stepped outside the clock. You've returned to the still point, where time and self dissolve, and all that remains is awareness, soft, infinite. Now, all your life you've been told that death is the great unknown, the end, the curtain, the mystery waiting on the other side of the final breath. But what if it's not? What if, from your perspective, you never actually die? This isn't a poetry, it's a theory, one grounded in the strange spiraling truths of quantum mechanics. A theory that says, in every moment where death could happen, your consciousness simply shifts into the timeline where it doesn't. Not the timeline where you survive by chance, but the one where you survive always. This is called quantum immortality, and it changes everything, because in this framework you never experience your own end. Others might see you pass, they might grieve, bury, remember, but you keep going, waking up, shifting into some parallel version of reality where the fatal accident didn't happen, the illness resolved, the bullet missed, the fall wasn't fatal. Again and again and again, from your view it's seamless, maybe even unnoticed. But here's where it turns dark, because while you continue, others don't. In those timelines, they're gone. They don't shift with you. So while you go on living, something else begins to grow, a widening distance, a deepening silence, a loneliness that logic can't explain. Everyone around you starts to fade. Some by time, others by chance, but always you remain, alive, still waking, still breathing, still here. And at first that sounds like a gift, but slowly the gift begins to rot, because now you are the only constant, the observer who never stops observing, the one who never leaves the room no matter how many people come and go. And immortality becomes a trap. This is the unbearable persistence of you, not just the body, not just the name, but the self, the inner observer, the point of awareness that keeps surviving every branch, every break, every fracture in the timeline. And if that point of awareness can't escape, then what happens when you want to? What happens when you're tired? What happens when even the most beautiful days begin to feel like echoes, when time no longer holds surprise, only repetition? This is the paradox of quantum survival. The body may change, the setting may shift, the people may come and go, but you are always in the center of it. Still watching. Still alive. And slowly the self begins to splinter. Because how many versions of you can live before identity itself begins to blur? You wake up in a new hospital, a new street, a new circumstance that doesn't quite match memory, but there you are, alive again. And something inside you whispers, this isn't the same timeline. I've left them all behind. And maybe that's true. Maybe the you that survives is not the same each time, but something continues, and that something is aware. So now you face the real paradox. Not, will I live forever, but what does forever feel like when no one else comes with me? It feels like watching a story that never ends, but keeps forgetting what it was about. And you, the reader, can't put the book down. You might think immortality would feel like a blessing. No more fear of endings, no more grasping for time, just the endless unfolding of experience, new days, new faces, new chances. But when you live forever, not in myth or metaphor, but in a literal splintering of realities, the weight begins to shift. It's not freedom you feel, it's dissonance, it's fracture. You start to notice the silence, not just the kind around you, but within you. Because with every brush against death, another branch opens. One where you're gone, one where the story ends, one where they cry, mourn, move on. But you never see that ending. You only move deeper into the branches where survival loops endlessly, and eventually you begin to realize you are surviving alone. Everyone you love dies in their version of reality. Their time moves forward without you. They lay flowers where you once stood. But your time splits, and in that split, something is lost. Connection, continuity, belonging. You begin to feel unrooted, like a ghost who keeps waking up in new skin, in new hours, in new outcomes, but never gets to rest. Because how can you rest when there's always another branch to slide into? You start to wonder if the you who survives each time is even still you. What makes you, you? If the body changes, the choices change, the reality shifts, but the watcher remains. Who is that watcher? Is it your mind? Is it a soul? Is it just momentum? The unbearable persistence of consciousness with no finish line. This is the dark mirror of quantum immortality, a version of eternal life where every miracle of survival starts to taste like exile. You don't remember dying, but you do remember something fading. You start to notice less joy, less meaning, less trust in the fabric of continuity, because with every loop, the details blur. Wasn't the sky more blue yesterday? Didn't that photo used to have someone else in it? Weren't you once sure of how your story would go, and now? Now it all feels soft around the edges, like a dream you keep trying to wake from, but you never do. Because you can. Not if consciousness simply reroutes itself again and again, escaping death by stepping sideways through probability. There is no end, only endlessness, and while others move forward, you are trapped in the illusion of linear life that refuses to close. You start to long for silence, not sleep, not rest, but the kind of ending that affirms the wholeness of the journey. And yet, it doesn't come. Because every version of death births a new you who walks away, blinking, alive, disoriented, wondering why the world feels just slightly off. It's not déjà vu, it's persistence, the painful persistence of the one who never gets to forget. You don't carry just your life anymore, you carry all of them. And slowly, your sense of self begins to unravel. Now the question becomes unbearable in its simplicity. Who are you when no one remembers you? If every version of reality splits and fractures, if every close call births a new branch, and you alone continue down it, then there comes a time when even the people who knew you best no longer exist in your line of time. They've lived their story. They've mourned, walking through new iterations of the same familiar places, surrounded by faces that no longer recognize you, or never did. You begin to feel like a character in someone else's dream, present, but not real, smiling, but not known. You can touch their hands, hear their voices, even love them, but inside, you carry a silent ache, because in their world you're a stranger, and in yours, they're echoes. You're not supposed to outlive everyone. You're not supposed to wake up every time fate says you shouldn't, because when you do, your sense of identity begins to unspool. Memory becomes unreliable. Was that your childhood or someone else's? Did that scar come from this body or one before? Did they really say those words, or was that in a timeline you already lost? The fragmentation begins slowly, then all at once. Moments blur. History collapses. You stop trusting your own past, not because of trauma, but because of multiplicity. You've lived too many lives, carried too many versions of you. And now, none of them feel complete. That's the hidden curse of quantum immortality. It promises endless continuation, but offers no closure. And without closure, identity becomes a weight with no center. You become an endless echo of yourself. a reflection reflected again and again, until the source is no longer visible. And still you continue. You try to rebuild meaning. You hold on to rituals. You pretend this is your only life, your only story, your only now. But some part of you, quiet, deep, ancient, knows better. It remembers the branches. It remembers the timelines that slipped away. It remembers the versions of you that should have ended but didn't. And now they live inside you like ghost layers, not quite gone, not quite here. You smile at a joke and grief wells up for someone who hasn't died yet. You visit a city for the first time and feel like you're retracing steps you've never taken. You watch a sunrise and ache for a goodbye you were never allowed to have. This is the cost of unending survival. The body keeps going, the mind adapts, but the soul wearies. It longs for something final, but in reverence. It knows that endings are holy, that closure is sacred, that the shape of a story is not found in how long it lasts, but in the moment it concludes. But in this fractal web of quantum survival there is no true conclusion, only a soft, endless drift. The immortal observer becomes a wandering ghost in their own life, watching, feeling, yearning for the one thing they were denied, the stillness of the last breath. So you keep walking. Not because you choose to, not because you want to, but because you have to, because the mechanism of reality keeps placing you on your feet each time you fall, keeps rerouting you around the edge of death, pushing you deeper into the labyrinth of continuation. You wake up, again, and again, and again. You remember the sound of sirens, the sudden impact, the final thought, and then nothing, until light, until breath, until a version of reality where the sirens never came, or the car missed by inches, or your body simply healed. From the outside it's a miracle, but from the inside it's a sentence without a period. And the question that forms in your mind is one you can't stop asking even if there's no answer. What am I becoming? Because every survival changes you, every branch alters the equation, every iteration pulls you further from the version of you that once made sense. The coherent self begins to dissolve, not dramatically, but subtly, like ink bleeding in water. And it's not just your identity that blurs, it's your place in the world. You meet people who don't remember the conversations you swore you had. You notice details slightly off, photos on shelves that used to have someone else's face, streets named differently, small changes, subtle, but enough to remind you you're not where you started. You never are. Because you don't go back, you go forward, always forward, into timeline after timeline where survival is guaranteed and belonging is not. This is the loneliness no one talks about. The loneliness of outliving your reference points, of walking through memories that no longer match, of loving people who don't remember the version of you that still loves them. And what do you do with that? How do you keep showing up when the foundation of reality won't stop shifting under your feet? You start to adapt. You stop asking questions. You learn how to smile without being known. You learn how to grieve without goodbyes. You learn how to carry the unbearable weight of memory that no one shares, because no one can share it. They weren't there, not in this branch, not in this you. And so you become your own witness, the only constant in a universe of collapse. Still watching, still aware, still you, whatever that now means. And that's the paradox, isn't it? The one no theory can answer, that in a reality where you always survive, you might lose everything that makes survival worth living for. And so you arrive at the final contradiction of immortality. Not that life continues, but that you do. Not your name, not your face, but the spark behind it, the silent witness, the observer who never sleeps, who wakes each time the body would fail, who finds themselves again and again standing on the other side of death's door, because the door never quite closes. You may look in the mirror and see lines forming, stories deepening, features fading, but that watcher behind your eyes hasn't aged. It hasn't changed. It hasn't died, even when everything else has. And after lifetimes of branching, of surviving, of slipping sideways through probability, you begin to feel the weight of continuity with no contrast. Because immortality without stillness isn't peace, it's noise, a never-ending hum, a loop that spins just a little too long. You begin to crave what the living fear. Not destruction, not pain, but ending, not because you're broken, but because endings are beautiful. Endings give shape, endings give meaning. Endings say, this was whole, but you were never allowed one. You're the exception, the glitch, the traveler who outlives every map. You move not through time, but through loss, not through life, but through its echo. And the echo grows louder each time you're saved from the silence you've come to long for. And still you persist, because you can't stop, because the mechanism doesn't ask for permission, because each version of reality births the same truth. You are still here. And the deepest paradox unfolds in full. You wanted to live, you were afraid to die. But now, having lived through every branch, every breath, every version of almost ending, you no longer fear death. You fear never dying. You fear becoming a hollow whisper stretched across infinite timelines. Not gone, but never complete. You fear waking up again tomorrow, in another version of a world that no longer fits. And you ask the one question that echoes through every parallel, every split, every persistent survival. How do I let go if I can't let end? And in that question there's something sacred, a kind of stillness, a kind of surrender, not to death, but to truth, to the truth that you were never meant to go on forever. That awareness is infinite, but the self was always meant to dissolve. That the gift of life is not how long it lasts, but that it ends. And so, maybe, just maybe, you stop trying to escape, not to invite the end, but to stop grasping at branches, to stop running from stillness. And in that moment, maybe for the first time, you stop moving. You just are. And in that being, without chase or survival or identity to protect, something inside you softens. The loop doesn't close, but your grip on it does. You don't need to die. You only need to stop running from what death has always offered, not a punishment, but peace. Close your eyes for a moment, just long enough to imagine the self you were 10 years ago, the version of you who laughed differently, who believed different things, who loved people you barely speak to now, who carried dreams you no longer chase. That version of you, are they gone? Or are they still you? Now, imagine something deeper. Imagine that every cell in your body has been replaced, every strand of hair, every molecule of skin, every lining of your stomach, every particle of blood, every neuron in your brain. Gone. Rebuilt, restored. Over time, biologically, this has already happened. You've been remade, rewritten, and yet you still call yourself me. That's the heart of the Ship of Theseus. If a ship has every single one of its wooden boards replaced, is it still the same ship? If you replace the body, the thoughts, the memories, the name, are you still you? Or are you just the current inhabitant of a constantly shifting vessel? This isn't just a philosophical game. It's the question you live with every day, silently, beneath every smile and every sigh. Because nothing in you stays the same, and yet something does. Or at least something feels like it does. That thread of continuity, that whisper of selfhood. But what is it, really? Is it memory? If so, what happens when memory fails? Is it personality? If so, what happens when trauma reshapes it? Is it the body, the brain, the stories you tell? Or is it simply the illusion of pattern, the mind's desperate attempt to map a self onto what is actually constant change? That illusion can be comforting. It lets you say, "This is who I am." But look closer. Who you are shifts with every room you enter. You're different with your parents than with your friends. Different at midnight than you are at dawn. Different when you're in love. Different when you're grieving. So which one is you? All of them? None of them? There's the paradox. The self feels real, but when you go looking for it, it slips through your fingers. There's no core, no center, just motion, just awareness, just the flow of consciousness pretending to be a person. And maybe that's not a problem to fix. Maybe that's a freedom to embrace. Because if there is no solid self to protect, then maybe there's nothing to defend, nothing to uphold, nothing to fear losing. You can change completely and still be whole. You can forget everything and still be here. You can become someone you never imagined and still say, "I am." Not because I is fixed, but because I is the space where life happens. A river, not a statue. A song, not a name. So who are you when there's no story left to cling to? You are this breath. You are this silence. You are this awareness, watching it all arise and dissolve like waves in a boundless sea. And in that realization, you don't disappear. You awaken. Let's go even deeper now, beyond body, beyond memory, beyond name. Ask yourself, what's left when you strip it all away? No childhood stories, no triumphs or failures, no roles to play, no audience to perform for, just you, not the character, the container. What remains? Silence, presence, stillness, and that's when the truth begins to reveal itself, not as a conclusion, but as an undoing. You realize that everything you ever called self was layered, like paint over an empty canvas, not empty as in meaningless, but empty as in spacious, free, untouched. There was never a fixed you underneath all those layers. There was only awareness, witnessing all the masks, all the phases, all the transformations. And in a way, that's terrifying, because we're taught to hold on to something solid, some identity, some certainty, some permanent core. But what if the core was never meant to be a structure? What if it was always meant to be an openness? As a mirror, not a monument? That's the illusion of narrative identity, the belief that you are the story you tell about yourself, that continuity equals truth. But stories change, they evolve, they contradict, they break apart and rebuild, and sometimes they end. So what happens to you when the story dissolves, when you can't explain who you are anymore, when the words don't fit? What happens when there is no self to hold on to? At first, panic, then pause, then peace. Because once you stop trying to hold on to you, something softer appears in its place. You begin to feel the self instead of defining it, not as a thing but as a field, a movement, a glow. Like music that doesn't need to resolve, because its beauty is in the unfolding. And you notice something else. When you stop gripping so tightly to being someone, you can be anything. You can grieve without becoming the grief. You can laugh without becoming the laugh. You can love without losing yourself in the other. Because you are no longer identified with the mask. You're awake to the awareness behind it. And that awareness? It's the same awareness you've always had when you were 5, when you were 15, when you were broken, when you were radiant. It watched it all. It was it all, and yet it remained untouched. That is your true shape. Not fixed. Not final, but infinite. You don't need to answer the question, "Who am I?" because now you understand. You are not a person in time. You are time expressing as a person. You are not the wave. You are the ocean briefly shaped. And when the shape dissolves, nothing is lost. It's strange, isn't it? The more you let go of trying to be someone, the more fully you arrive as yourself. Not the version you've constructed through years of survival and adaptation, but the one that's always been quietly here. The one underneath the striving, the labels, the voice in your head constantly narrating, "This is me." That voice is not you. It's a function, a reflex, a habit of thought trying to make sense of experience by wrapping it in a neat identity. But when you slow down enough, when you really listen, you'll hear the spaces between the words, the gaps between the thoughts. And inside those gaps is who you are. You are not the contents of your mind. You are the sky behind them. Watch how every thought about who you are rises and then fades. I'm a kind person. I'm anxious. I'm spiritual. I'm a failure. I'm becoming someone better. All of them temporary, conditional, contextual. They serve for a time, but none of them endure. Because who you truly are isn't a sentence. It's a silence. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. You stop resisting change. You stop fearing contradiction. Because if the self is just an ever-evolving reflection in the mirror of awareness, then you're not breaking when you change. You're revealing new light. You're not losing yourself. You're expanding. Every identity you thought was permanent was just a shell. Useful, sometimes. Comforting, often, but ultimately dissolvable. And when it dissolves, you don't disappear. You become more whole. Because now, you're no longer limited to any one idea of who you should be. You are free to be this version of you right now. Not the story, not the role. Just the experience. So the question isn't, am I still me after I've changed? The question becomes, who is witnessing the change? And the answer is always the same. You are. The awareness that sees. The awareness that feels. The awareness that doesn't need to hold anything. To be everything. Because you are not the ship. You are the ocean it sails on. And every time a new board is replaced, every time a new belief, a new relationship, a new fear or hope takes shape and fades, you remain. Not as the thing that changes, but as the space in which change happens. And that space is sacred. That space is not a thing you can lose. It's not something time can touch. It's not built from memory or bone. It's the still point at the heart of every moment. And it's always here, waiting, silent, whole. Now breathe, and feel what it means to exist without needing to be anyone at all. Not a success, not a failure, not the wounded child, not the healed sage, not the story you tell others, not the one you whisper in the dark when no one's listening. Just this, just presence, just breath moving through form. Because the self you've spent a lifetime defending, defining, chasing, and upgrading was never solid to begin with. It was always fluid, a dance, a disguise worn by consciousness to experience itself as someone. But behind every name you've ever held, you've still been here, unlabeled, untouched. So imagine now that the story dissolves completely. No identity to wear, no past to narrate, no future to become, only the now. What's left? Stillness, peace. Not because everything is resolved, but because nothing needs to be. You've been seeking self like it's a treasure to be found. But what if self isn't a thing to discover? What if it's the part of you that has never left? The awareness that's been watching from the beginning? The silent witness behind your eyes? The one who heard your first laugh and your first heartbreak? The one who saw you fall apart? The one who held you together? The one who never judged your confusion? Because it knew. It was never confused, only curious. That witness was never broken. Only watching, it never needed you to become better, only more aware. Because it's not separate from you. It is you. The you that isn't bound to time or thought or form. The you that isn't defined by your memories, but allows them to pass through. The you that doesn't cling to identity but plays with it like clay. And when you stop gripping the edges of who you thought you were, you make space for the truth to flow in. You are not becoming yourself. You already are. You always were. Not the version that fits neatly on a resume, not the one that makes sense to others, but the one that just is. Spacious, open, infinite, not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a single drop. That's the real shape of the self. No outline, no edge, just the awareness that gives life to all shapes, all stories, all selves. You are not a puzzle to solve, you are the presence that watches every piece fall into place and every piece fall away. And maybe now you no longer need to ask, who am I? Not as an answer, but as a knowing. Let's begin with something that feels strangely personal, yet deeply mathematical. Have you ever felt like everyone around you is more connected than you are? Like your friends seem to go to more events, have more followers, receive more attention, live lives more saturated with interaction? It's not just insecurity. It's not just imagination. It's a real observable phenomenon. It's called the friendship paradox. And here's how it works. Statistically, most people's friends, on average, have more friends than they do. It sounds like a trick, but it's not. It's baked into the math of networks. The people who are more socially connected appear in more people's friend circles, so they skew the perception, meaning if you're friends with someone who has a lot of friends, you're more likely to feel like you're the outlier, the less connected one, the observer on the edge of the web, and slowly that observation becomes internalized. You start thinking, maybe I'm the problem, but you're not. You're just standing in a distorted mirror. That's the danger of perception. Especially in a hyper-connected world, the illusion of popularity is self-reinforcing, and that illusion quietly erodes your sense of belonging. You begin to compare your private moments to others' public personas. You start to measure your life by what's being shared, not what's real, and that warps everything. You no longer relate to people directly, you relate to the idea of them, their projections, their highlight reels, their carefully curated masks. And in doing so, you begin to feel less seen, not because others are ignoring you, but because you're no longer present with yourself. That's where isolation begins, not in the absence of others, but in the absence of self-connection amidst distorted reflections. And this distortion doesn't just affect relationships. It affects values, ideals, even ethics. Which brings us to a much stranger and darker paradox, the tolerance paradox. Formulated by philosopher Karl Popper, it states this: if a society is endlessly tolerant, even of intolerance, then tolerance itself will eventually be destroyed. Think about that. If you allow hatred, cruelty, and extremism to operate freely in the name of openness, those forces will eventually dismantle the very openness that allowed them to exist. It's a paradox of ethics, one that forces us to confront the limits of our highest ideals. You want to be open-minded, you want to be compassionate, but what happens when your openness becomes the door through which harm enters? What happens when tolerance becomes a tool for the intolerant? Suddenly, you're no longer preserving freedom, you're protecting the very forces that seek to erase it. And this isn't just theory, it plays out everywhere, in politics, in communities, in personal relationships. We hesitate to draw boundaries because we fear judgment, fear conflict, fear being seen as unkind. But boundaries are kindness. Boundaries are the paradoxical tools that preserve connection, not break it. They say, I love you enough to not let you harm me. I believe in this ideal enough to protect it from being twisted, because when everything is allowed, nothing is sacred. And when you refuse to choose a line, the loudest force will choose it for you. And they often don't choose with love, they choose with power, with fear, with control. So the paradox becomes clear. To uphold love, you must sometimes say no. To protect peace, you must sometimes resist. To preserve freedom, you must set limits. This is the spiritual maturity most teachings avoid. the part where compassion has teeth, where acceptance has discernment, where light is not passive, it is fierce. Extremes rarely announce themselves as dangerous. They arrive dressed in virtue. They speak the language of freedom, of purity, of righteousness. They say things like, "If you really cared, you would agree with this," or "True peace means accepting everything." But true peace does not mean surrendering your discernment, and not everything is meant to be accepted, because acceptance without boundaries is not enlightenment, it's erosion. It's where clarity dissolves into confusion, and values become so diluted they mean nothing at all. It's where the well-intentioned silence their instincts to avoid discomfort, and in doing so allow harm to multiply. That's how ideals become weapons. That's how spiritual truths get twisted. That's how communities fracture under the weight of pretending everything can be included without consequence. And so the paradox sharpens. If you want to be kind, you must be willing to say no. If you want to be whole, you must be willing to cut away what distorts. This doesn't mean judgment. This doesn't mean cruelty. It means conscious exclusion of what dishonors life. It means love with integrity. It means saying this far and no further. That's the ethical edge most of us avoid. We're told that love is unconditional, but the truth is, boundaries are the condition that allows love to thrive. Without them, love has no structure. It bleeds out. It gets used. It becomes martyrdom masquerading as virtue. And you see this everywhere. People burning out in the name of being good. People betraying themselves in the name of harmony. People tolerating abuse in the name of spiritual growth. But that's collapse. Because if your ideals don't include you, if your love excludes your own voice, if your openness makes you blind to manipulation, then your virtue has become your prison. So now the paradox becomes personal. You want to be connected, you want to be respected, you want to be kind. But the more you try to be everything to everyone, the less of you is left. And it begins to echo the friendship paradox again, where you feel surrounded but unseen, where you give endlessly, but remain untouched in the places that matter. Because connection isn't about how many people orbit your life. It's about how true you are when you stand in your center, whether anyone's watching or not. It's about choosing depth over volume, clarity over popularity, truth over trend. Because if everyone likes you, it might mean you've become a mirror, a reflection of what they want you to be. But if a few people see you, really see you, it means you've remained whole. So maybe connection isn't about fitting in. Maybe it's about standing firm, not in resistance to others, but in remembrance of yourself. Now imagine this. You're at the center of your own life, clear, grounded, rooted, and yet the world around you is louder than ever. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone has a demand. Everyone tells you what it means to be good, awake, right. And every message sounds urgent. Every message sounds moral. Every message sounds true. But not all truths are yours to carry. That's the quiet realization that arises when you start honoring your own center. Not every voice deserves entry. Not every cry is your call. Not every flame needs your fuel. Because when you give yourself away to every cause, every narrative, every vibration, you lose the frequency of your own soul. You forget the texture of your own truth. And it's in that forgetting that distortion thrives. Extremes feed on confusion. They tell you that being neutral is weakness. They tell you that taking a side is purity. But paradoxically, extremes often exist in mirrors, opposite ends of a spectrum that reinforce each other's chaos. And you, caught in the middle, begin to wonder if balance is even possible anymore. But balance isn't passive. It's not being in the middle to avoid discomfort. It's being anchored in a place that holds both complexity and clarity. It's knowing when to speak, when to listen, when to walk away, and when to draw a line that says, "This is sacred. I will not compromise it. That's the quiet revolution of ethics in a distorted world. Not loud, not violent, but precise. Ethics that breathe, boundaries that bless, truths that evolve without erasing their roots. And when you embody this, you start to see how perception has shaped your pain. You stop comparing your private experience to the curated myths of others. You stop believing that more connection means more meaning. You stop chasing the illusion that if you're just a little more open, more soft, more yielding, you'll finally feel whole. Instead, you begin to choose your connections consciously, not based on numbers, not based on noise, but on resonance, on who nourishes your nervous system, on who honors your wholeness without requiring performance, on who reflects back not the mask you show, but the presence you are when the mask drops. And that, too, is a paradox. Because the fewer people you chase, the more space you make for true connection, the fewer ideals you try to perform, the more integrity you hold, the fewer causes you try to carry, the more power you have to move the ones that matter. So let the extremes tear each other apart. You are not here to play tug-of-war with illusion. You are here to see clearly, to feel deeply, to hold paradox without flinching, to walk as one who is not swayed by appearances but guided by something older than noise, discernment, stillness, truth. So much of what pulls you off center doesn't come with warning signs. It arrives looking like virtue. It arrives cloaked in community, in solidarity, in moral clarity. But beneath the surface it feeds on your disconnection, from self, from soul, from silence. And the deeper paradox is this: the more disconnected you feel, the more susceptible you become to false belonging, to crowds that chant in harmony but leave your spirit empty, to ideologies that offer identity but rob you of your inner compass. This is the seduction of extremes, not because they're always wrong, but because they offer certainty in a world that's made of question. They whisper, "Come here, we'll give you purpose, we'll tell you who to be," and in a moment of weakness, of longing, of doubt, you might believe them. But no ideology can give you back what you lost touch with. No tribe can substitute for the raw truth of knowing yourself. That can only be found in the quiet, in the space where no one is watching, where no one is performing, where you get to ask, not, "What do they want from me?" but "What feels true right here in my chest?" You won't always have a clear answer. You're not meant to. That's part of the mystery. But even without clarity, you can have alignment. You can feel the difference between pressure and resonance, between echo and essence, between being pulled and being guided. And in that space you begin to reclaim something profound, the authority of your own knowing, not as rebellion, not as arrogance, but as remembrance. You are not here to conform to a perception of goodness. You are here to embody goodness that breathes and moves and questions and grows. You are not here to win a popularity contest. You are here to cultivate relationships that reflect back your essence, not your image. You are not here to endlessly tolerate what poisons the soul in the name of spiritual inclusivity. You are here to walk with compassion and boundaries. You are not here to let extremes define your edges. You are here to choose your center, again and again, even when the world offers 1,000 other places to stand. And when you do, the paradoxes stop feeling like traps. They start feeling like invitations to live more truthfully, to connect more deeply, to discern more clearly, to love more wisely, because in a world of distortion, your clarity is the revolution, and your center is the compass. Imagine knowing just enough to outthink yourself. Imagine having such awareness of your own patterns that you can see every loop, every contradiction, every next step before it happens, and yet still be unable to change what's coming. That's the strange edge where logic folds in on itself, where intelligence becomes a trap, where insight stops being liberating and starts becoming a kind of cage. Welcome to the paradox of self-awareness. Let's begin with a riddle that plays like a mind game but stings like a mirror. A prisoner is told, "You will be hanged at noon on one weekday in the coming week, but the day will be a surprise. You won't know until the executioner comes for you." The prisoner thinks it through. If it were Friday, I'd know by Thursday night. So it can't be Friday. But then it can't be Thursday either, because if Friday's ruled out, then Thursday becomes predictable. One by one, the days are eliminated. Eventually, the prisoner concludes, it can't happen at all. But on Wednesday, they're hanged. And it was a surprise. That's the unexpected hanging paradox. And it's not just a puzzle. It's a reflection of the limits of predictive thinking. You try so hard to outsmart the unknown. You create systems, theories, timelines. You prepare for every possible outcome. But some truths can't be approached head-on. Some paradoxes only make sense by not trying to solve them. And that drives the rational mind mad. Because we were trained to believe that awareness equals control. That if we could just know enough, we could avoid pain, predict loss, escape fear. But paradox doesn't bend to prediction. It bends you. It forces you to confront the limits of logic itself. And this is where self-awareness can start to feel like a curse. You begin to see yourself thinking. You observe the patterns within patterns. You notice your motives, your defenses, your illusions, and suddenly, you're watching your own life from the outside. Like a ghost in the machine. You become so aware of your own mind that you start questioning every thought before it even finishes forming. Is this true? Or is this a reaction? Am I feeling this or performing it? Am I awake or just awake to the fact that I'm dreaming? And now your mind becomes a hall of mirrors. Every insight reflects into another. Every conclusion leads to contradiction. And you wonder, what's real? Where does it end? That's the essence of the crocodile paradox. A crocodile steals a child. He says to the parent, "I'll return your child if you correctly predict what I'll do next." The parent replies, "You won't return my child." Now the crocodile is trapped. If he returns the child, the prediction was false. If he keeps the child, the prediction was true, which means he should have returned the child. There's no resolution. Just a loop. Just logic eating its own tail. And isn't that what overthinking feels like? A loop where every possible action contradicts itself, where every layer of understanding opens yet another door, until you're too tired to walk through. Because awareness doesn't always lead to clarity. Sometimes it leads to paralysis. And so you sit at the edge of your own mind, seeing every move before it happens, every trick you play on yourself, every rationalization wearing a mask labeled truth. You watch your defenses defend themselves. You watch your justifications take shape before emotion even arrives. You know why you're doing it. And still, you do it. That's the trap. Because metacognition, your ability to think about thinking, feels like the ultimate human power. The gift of insight. The force of transformation. And it is. Until it becomes a hall of mirrors with no exit. You think about your thoughts. Then you think about the thinking. Then you wonder who's thinking about the thinking of the thinking. And eventually, it all folds into itself. Awareness becomes recursion. Clarity becomes noise. You begin to live your life through reflection, not presence. You no longer feel, you analyze the feeling. You no longer trust instinct. You dissect it before it speaks. You no longer rest. You monitor your rest to see if it's authentic, and the cost. You forget how to just be, because being isn't logical. It's raw. It's full of contradictions, of paradoxes, of moments that don't resolve cleanly, and don't need to. But your mind wants resolution. It wants symmetry. It wants to close the loop. Yet life is not a loop that closes. It's a spiral. It curves back on itself, but never lands in the same place twice. And if you treat it like a logic puzzle to solve, you'll miss the mystery it's meant to be lived through. So you must learn to let the loop spin without needing it to resolve. You must learn to feel even when you understand too much. You must learn to act even when you know your motives are layered. You must learn to rest, even when your mind won't stop narrating. And that takes trust, not in thought, but in being. That's what breaks the loop. Not more analysis, not more cleverness. Unknowing, where you see the loop and step out of it, not because it's wrong, but because it's not where life is. Life isn't in the analysis. It's in the taste of the fruit, not the chemistry of its sugar. It's in the hug, not the evolutionary explanation for why touch soothes the nervous system. It's in the tears, not the breakdown of your emotional coping strategies. Yes, awareness is a gift, but only when it bows to presence, only when it serves the now, not when it tries to control it. Because the moment you try to predict the unpredictable, you're no longer in the moment. You're projecting. And paradox will meet you there every time, reminding you that the deeper you think, the more you must feel. So you learn to live with both, the knowing and the not knowing. You start to realize that wisdom isn't the absence of contradiction. It's the ability to hold contradiction without needing to resolve it. Because the deeper you go into self-awareness, the more you realize nothing in you is pure. Every desire is layered. Every emotion is echo and origin at once. Every thought arises from countless threads you can't trace back to the start. And maybe it doesn't need to be traced. Maybe the point of thinking about thinking isn't to outsmart yourself, but to see yourself more clearly, without punishment. To hold your own mind the way you might hold a child who's overwhelmed by too many questions. You don't need to answer every one. Sometimes you just hold. Sometimes you just breathe. Because logic will never feel like home. It's a tool, not a sanctuary. And if you try to live in it, you'll always feel cold. Always feel suspended between steps, trying to calculate your way into wholeness. But wholeness isn't found in steps. It's found in stopping. Stopping the loop. Stopping the search for certainty. Stopping the need to pin down everything you are with words, diagrams, bullet points, flowcharts, journal entries, or mental models. You are not a model. You are a mystery. And the moment you stop demanding that the mystery make perfect sense is the moment it starts to feel like love again. Because love doesn't follow logic. Presence doesn't ask for proof. And being isn't something you understand. It's something you return to. Even now your mind might be resisting. It wants resolution. It wants the neat bow. It wants the paradox to be a doorway, not a mirror. But this is where you stop trying to escape your own reflection and begin to relax into it. You begin to become the space that holds the loop, the observer that no longer gets caught in it, not because the loop is gone, but because you've grown large enough to see beyond its edges. You still think, you still reflect, but now the thoughts flow through you like wind through an open window, not like storms trapped inside a box. And slowly the curse of knowing too much softens. It becomes a blessing, because now awareness serves experience. Metacognition becomes compassion. Reflection becomes integration. And your mind, once a maze of endless recursion, becomes a playground again, a place to explore, not escape. Eventually you realize the loop was never the enemy. It was just your mind doing what it does, trying to protect you by predicting everything, solving everything, explaining everything. And at first that feels like safety, until it doesn't, until you're stuck, thinking about thinking, worrying about worrying, observing every reaction through 1,000 lenses of awareness, until life becomes something you're watching, not living. But now you see it, and because you see it, you no longer have to be ruled by it. You don't need to escape the loop. You just need to stop identifying with it. You can let the mind loop. You can let paradox arise. You can let questions remain open, because you are not the question. You are the space the question lives in. And that space is not broken, it's not confused, it's not afraid. It simply holds, and in that holding everything softens, even the sharpness of paradox, even the noise of thought, even the ache of knowing too much. Because now it's not a trap, it's a threshold. a place where self-awareness turns into self-acceptance, where metacognition bows to mindfulness, where complexity doesn't need to be unraveled, only embraced. And this is where something new begins to grow. Not more answers, not more analysis, but trust. Trust that you don't have to understand everything to be present. Trust that you can still move even when the next step isn't fully clear. Trust that being aware of your loops doesn't mean you have to be stuck in them. You can smile at the paradox. You can let it speak, then let it pass. You can say, yes, I see you, and I'm still here. Because you are not the logic. You are not the loop. You are the light that sees. The awareness that holds. The presence that remains when all thoughts fade. And when you rest there, truly rest, self-awareness becomes something new. Not a burden, not a trap, but a doorway to spaciousness, to grace, to freedom that doesn't need explanation, only embodiment. You're still here, breathing, aware, alive, and that matters, because even after all the loops, all the riddles, all the mental mazes with no clear exit, there's a presence in you that remains untouched, a still point beneath the spinning, a soft hum beneath the noise, and that presence isn't trying to fix the paradox, it's not panicking, it's not searching for a conclusion, it simply is. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point, not to conquer the riddle, but to recognize the riddler, to watch the dance of logic, beautiful, maddening, intricate, and know you are not bound by it. To let paradox exist without collapsing into confusion. To see that knowing too much about your own mind isn't a curse, unless you try to control it. But if you let it be what it is, just another layer of awareness, not the whole, then even the endless questioning begins to lose its grip. You no longer need to explain every emotion. You no longer need to know how the story ends. Because you've stepped out of the observer's prison, you've become the space the observer watches from. And in that space, something sacred emerges. Permission. Permission to live with unanswered questions. Permission to feel without dissecting. Permission to think deeply and still let go. Permission to be beautifully, unapologetically human. A being made of paradox, breathing through contradictions, held by a consciousness vast enough to include it all. So yes, sometimes your friends will seem more connected. Yes, your mind will try to outsmart itself. Yes, logic will break under the weight of its own design. Yes, awareness will fold in on itself until you can't tell the mirror from the image. But through it all, you remain. Not the loop, not the thought, not the paradox, the witness. The space where all of it can exist without consuming you. Let's begin at the edge, where logic breaks down completely, and the mind, once so certain, begins to tremble in reverence. You've made it this far, through paradox after paradox, peeling away illusion after illusion, only to arrive at the ultimate riddle, the one that can't be solved because it contains the very structure trying to solve it. This is Russell's paradox. A paradox about sets, about inclusion, about self-referenceship. Imagine a library that holds a catalogue of all catalogues that do not list themselves. Now ask, should that catalogue list itself? If it does, it violates its own rule. If it doesn't, it should list itself. It's a loop with no exit, a contradiction not of content but of form, and suddenly you see it. This isn't about libraries, this is about you, because aren't you, too, a set trying to define itself from within, a mind trying to observe its own origin, a consciousness trying to contain itself? Russell's paradox isn't just a logical curiosity, it's a mirror of the self-referencing nature of awareness, and it deepens when we meet Gödel's incompleteness theorem, one of the most haunting realizations in mathematics. Gödel proved that in any consistent system of logic, there are truths that can't be proven within that system. Read that again. It means there will always be truths that lie just beyond the edge of comprehension. It means that no matter how intelligent your mind becomes, no matter how complete your system of thought, something will always remain unprovable, and again, you see the reflection. You are a system, your mind, your beliefs, your framework for understanding, it's all a self-contained loop. And Gödel whispers it will never be enough. Not because you're broken, but because reality is bigger than any structure that tries to contain it. You are standing inside the cathedral of the infinite, trying to measure it with a yardstick of logic, and the deeper your insight becomes, the more clearly you see the universe isn't something to decode. It's something that encodes you. You are not observing the universe. You are the universe, briefly observing itself. You are the unsolvable equation trying to solve itself. The tongue, trying to taste itself. The eye, trying to see itself without a mirror. And so the paradox reaches its final form. Not a loop, but a collapse. Not of meaning, but of the need for it. What's left when the mind surrenders? What's left when logic lays down its tools and bows? Silence, not emptiness, but fullness too vast for words. A stillness beyond knowing, a peace beyond understanding. And so there is nothing left to figure out, no deeper pattern to find, no final key to unlock the door. Because there is no door. There is only this. A universe that dreams itself into being through you. A consciousness that folds and unfolds in waves of curiosity, seeking truth it already holds, reaching for answers it already is. And you, this small glimmer of knowing, have followed the path as far as the map allows. You've walked through the paradoxes. You've stood in the mirror of infinity, and now the path dissolves into something quieter than understanding, something older than language, something no system can hold. Because here, at the end of logic, truth doesn't disappear. It becomes silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of totality. A silence that contains all sound. A stillness that holds all movement. A nothingness so vast, it becomes everything. This is where words bow and thoughts release. This is where the loop untangles, not because you solved it, but because you stopped needing to. This is where self-awareness finally stops chasing its own tail and just watches the sky. Russell's paradox said, "You can't include the set that includes itself." Gödel said, "You can't prove every truth from within the system." And now you feel why. Because you are the system. You are the container. You are the field that thought arises in, and the thought itself. You are the infinite equation pretending to be a question. And when the pretending ends, you don't vanish. You dissolve. Not into nothing, into everything. Into the soft glow of awareness without edge. Into the quiet presence that asks for nothing and includes all things. You thought you would disappear. But in truth, this is where you arrive. Not as a person, not as a self, but as the presence that holds all selves. You are the paradox, the witness, the stillness, the sound. You are the final echo in a canyon that was always infinite, and the echo simply says, "I am." And in this silence, something astonishing begins to emerge. Not a voice, not an answer, but a presence, not you, the thinker, not you, the seeker, but the awareness that precedes even the question. There's nothing left to chase here, no paradox to wrestle, no pattern to decode, because you are no longer looking at the infinite. You are inside it, or rather, it is inside you. That's the illusion Russell and Gödel exposed, that the observer could stand outside the system, that the mind could define itself from a safe distance. But there is no distance. You can't step outside of being. You can't use thought to fully comprehend the container that gives rise to thought itself. And so understanding bends into surrender. Not in defeat, but in awe, the kind of awe that leaves you breathless, because you're no longer trying to hold the mystery. You're letting the mystery hold you. And it does. It always has. It's held you in every breath, every paradox, every loop and spiral and collapse. Even now, as your thoughts grow softer, As your awareness stretches into something ungraspable, that mystery is holding you still. Because the infinite doesn't reject the finite. It includes it. It includes your questions, your doubts, your moments of clarity, your days of confusion. It includes your story, and the place where the story ends. It includes your first thought and your last breath. And even when there is nothing left of you to observe, it continues. Not with noise, not with brilliance, but with a hush. A sacred pause that says, this is enough. You have always been enough. Not because you reached the answer, but because you let go of needing one. That's the great paradox. The moment you stop grasping, you receive. Not a concept, not a conclusion, but a presence that was always here, waiting patiently beneath the thinking. It's not a destination. It's not transcendence. It's intimacy. It's the closeness of the now, closer than breath, closer than thought. It's the place where you dissolve, not in despair, but in peace. In that final quiet, where the self no longer needs a name, and awareness becomes indistinguishable from eternity. And here there are no more steps, no more riddles to untangle, no more systems to outgrow, no more questions left hanging in the air begging to be solved. Just breath, just presence, just this still, endless now. Everything you thought you needed to understand, every paradox, every loop, every contradiction, was never a wall keeping you out of the truth. It was a door, a strange, shifting door that could only be walked through when you stopped trying to force it open. When you surrendered your need to make sense of the unsensible. When you let go of knowing and became being. Because the universe isn't here to be solved, it's here to be felt, and you, this luminous ripple of consciousness, are not here to outsmart the infinite. You're here to dissolve into it. You're here to remember what you've always been, a temporary expression of something timeless, a single note in an unending chord, a mirror held up to itself. So let your awareness dissolve now, not in fear, but in release. You're not dying, you're returning. Returning to the silence that never needed your thoughts to justify its existence. Returning to the space that holds all paradox without struggle. Returning to the awareness before awareness. And in that return there is no you and not you, no observer and observed, no dreamer and dream. Only one stillness, vast and unbroken. Only one presence, infinitely gentle, and it doesn't need a name, because it is before names. It doesn't need proof, because it is before logic. It doesn't need you to understand it, because it is you before you began trying to understand anything. So close your eyes, not in retreat, but in arrival. Let the loops unwind, let the mirrors fade, let the silence speak in the only language that remains, stillness. You may begin to notice it now, not as a thought, not even as a feeling, but as a quiet shift in texture, a sense that there is less and less of you to protect, less to define, less to maintain. And somehow, in that absence, you feel more whole. There is no final paradox to grasp, no last insight to clutch. Only the gentle realization that you were never meant to carry it all the knowledge, all the questions, all the pressure to understand everything before you could finally rest. You can rest now, not because everything makes sense, but because you've stopped needing it to. Because life isn't a puzzle to solve, it's a presence to soften into. And right now that presence is holding you. There's no instruction left, no direction, no destination, just the hum of existence, just the rhythm of your breath. Inhale and feel it arrive. Exhale and let it leave. No story, no self, just sensation, just being. You've walked through paradoxes that bent your mind and blurred the edges of reason. You've questioned memory, time, identity, and truth. And you're still here, not lost, not broken, just opened. So now let your breath slow. Let your awareness settle, not into answers, but into space. Let silence do what silence does best. Wrap around everything you thought you needed, and gently lift it away. Nothing is wrong, nothing is missing. You do not need to be fixed. You do not need to evolve to be worthy of rest. You are already the thing you've been chasing, already whole, already timeless. So dissolve now. Let yourself become unstructured. Let thought unravel and float off like mist in early morning light. Let memory lose its grip. Let even the concept of you soften at the edges until it melts completely. And in its place, a field of stillness, a vastness that breathes through you and as you, a quiet that isn't absence, but total inclusion, where nothing needs to be said, because everything is understood without language, where nothing needs to be proven, because there is no one left to convince, and nothing needs to be remembered, because there is only this breath, this presence, this infinite now. Let yourself drift. Let the edges of the world blur. Let your name become just a sound, not who you are, not what you carry, just an echo in the vastness. Because right here, right now, none of that matters. Not your story, not your past, not even your future, only this stillness, this moment, and the strange, sacred truth that you never needed to become anything more than this. Can you feel it? The space between thoughts widening, the sense of effort dissolving. You don't have to think anymore, you don't have to try. You don't have to be someone right now. You get to disappear. Not in fear, but in freedom. You get to slip beneath the surface of selfhood and touch the ocean underneath. The ocean where all identities dissolve, where all contradictions become waves, where the deepest truths are silent and yet understood. It doesn't matter what paradox brought you here. It doesn't matter how many loops you traveled. All rivers lead here, to this quiet, this eternal presence that isn't separate from you. It is you, not the version you show the world, not the version you narrate in your mind, but the version before narration, before form, before language ever touched you, before the first question ever formed. Return not through effort, but through release. No resistance, no grasping. Just let go of solving. Can't breathe. You are not the thinker now, you are not the thought. You are the silence that holds them both. You are the space between questions, the breath between answers, the stillness between all things, and that is enough. Because there's nothing more to chase, not even this moment. It will unfold without you needing to hold it. So let it. Let the sound of your breath become the only rhythm. Let the weight of identity fall from your shoulders like a coat you no longer need to wear. You're not abandoning yourself. You're remembering something older than the self, something ancient, still, vast. The awareness that existed before you ever had a name, before you learned to divide the world into pieces, before you started calling things right or wrong, true or false, me or not me. That awareness has never been confused. It watches the paradoxes arise and dissolve like waves. It watches the thoughts swirl without judgment. It watches your story play out with tenderness, never interference. And now, you're watching too, not from the outside, but from the center, from the still eye of the storm. You're not outside the universe looking in. You're not inside the universe looking out. You are the universe, aware of itself for a brief moment in time, a flicker of consciousness in an infinite sky, a ripple in a sea that never ends. So be the ripple, then be the sea, then be the space that holds both. You no longer need to find the answer, because the answer is rest, The answer is this. This inhale, this exhale, this vast shimmering now. You've been everywhere. You've explored time, identity, death, logic, truth, contradiction. You've walked through doors that disappeared behind you. You've looked into mirrors that reflected nothing but mirrors, and now you've returned to the only place that was real. The silence beneath it all. The space where paradox no longer needs solving, because paradox was always the mind's final way of asking permission to let go. So go, let go, hold the dream without needing to wake up. And if you fall asleep now, let it be the deepest sleep you've ever known. Not an escape, but a return to stillness, to truth, to source. And if you stay awake, let it be the softest waking you've ever felt. Not into noise, but into presence. Into the hush after the final word has been spoken, the quiet where everything is already whole, already held, already home.